banks wanting to foreclose on farmers will be forced to head to mediation first under a proposed new law. Farmers owe more than $63 billion, and that is up about 270% on 20 years ago. The Farm Debt Mediation Bill will require creditors to offer farmers who default on payments mediation before they take any enforcement action. Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor joins me now. Good evening, Minister. What does this mean in practical terms?
Look, what it does, it just puts in place a scheme. It doesn't necessarily change the outcomes, but it puts in place a scheme that has some disciplines in it. Mediators will be appointed. They can be nominated by the bank, and the farmer can then select which one of three. And then there'll be some timelines on the process. Because in the past, there's been a huge imbalance of power, and basically when a farmer, through a whole lot of different reasons, it might be an event, it might be a biosecurity issue like M. bovis, as we've seen, it may just be change in circumstances, and in the farmers, they may be cash positive, but the equity may have disappeared, and the banks decide that they should, close them down or sell them up. And in a situation like that, the farmer has very little power at all. And this is just designed to bring some balance back in so that there's a negotiation has to take place before any final decisions are made.
So who pays for the mediation service?
They split that, and it may not be a huge cost at all, but it's split.
And so are the decisions binding?
Yes, they are binding, and the mediator will then write a report. It comes back through MPI, will oversee the process, make sure that the mediators, they will have to be certified, that they have, skills, appropriate skills and knowledge. They obviously have to have the trust of both parties, and then they will write a report which will then be binding.
So how often are banks foreclosing on farmers then? Because you obviously see a demand for this service. So what are the numbers?
No, look, to be fair, the banks, I think, have been very reasonable over the years, but there are situations where simply the imbalance of power means it's not unfair. It's certainly
but not everyone's being reasonable, Minister, or you wouldn't be going to the trouble of this creating this service. So who are the bad banks then, or who is creating the need for this service?
Well, look, it would be over 20 years that I have been working sometimes directly with farmers, sometimes indirectly. I know others who have. All of the banks have been like this. They, in summary, I guess, that they're bullies. They have all the power and they say what goes. And that's not a desirable situation. It's caused huge stress, and often, for farmers and their families, has been a very sad outcome. And we just want to bring some balance. They do this in Australia. The banks support it in Australia, and in fact, the banks are supporting this piece of legislation here because they actually, it's better for them to ensure that there's a fair process, not one driven by their local manager or by someone from head office.
So do you believe that some farmers are being bullied right now by banks?
Look, I think there's a bit of caution at the moment. There is a high level of debt, some uncertainty. There's probably always a situation where some farmer may think it being unfair, but I think if we start to see more foreclosures for whatever reason, and we go through these little splurges from time to time, we're just, as a coalition government, we're wanting to have a fair situation for all parties, including the banks, and often that hasn't been the case.
So I'm just wondering, why are you creating this service for farmers? As you would appreciate, a number of small businesses fail. They're not being offered something like this. So why are you passing a law to provide mediation, binding mediation for farmers who fail to meet debt repayments?
I guess there have been enough cases over the years in the farming sector to say that we need to make some changes. The Australians went through and passed legislation to bring some fairness. I understand that, in some small business situations, similar situations may arise, and I guess that MPs and others may assist. This is for farmers. They are complex debt situations, complex financing situations. There are a lot of factors affecting farmers and their operations. It's a family situation more often than not, and often, when they have to move from the farm, that's it. They often have nowhere else to go. So it's just.
So what are the figures for foreclosures? Yeah, so what are the figures for foreclosures? Because you're saying there's a need for this, and you're saying farmers, and there's a power imbalance there. So I'm just wanting to get a handle on how big this problem is as to why we need it. So in a given year, how many farmers are foreclosed on?
Look, I don't have the exact numbers, and they vary from year to year. It's low. It's probably 20 to 30. It's not a huge number, but the issue is, as a government, we're not going to stand by and let a situation that's clearly unfair. Farmers are, in a challenging environment. They are facing a climate day to day, changing prices, a whole lot of factors, and they are still, producing, $40+ billion worth of export earnings for us. So we need to encourage more young New Zealanders into farming, and, we're struggling to attract them, and partly it's because of the imbalance that they find themselves in when they have a huge debt, which is the capital requirement to go farming.
As part of this problem, though, people have joined industries when they are at their peak or when good money can be made, and the business that they've purchased or moved into is unsustainable. They haven't done their homework.
That may be the case, absolutely. And so we're not saying that those farmers who have made bad decisions, shouldn't, exit, but we're just ensuring that the process of exit is a fair one.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor.